Hi, my name is Randy Orozco.
Hi, my name is Isabel Acevedo.
Hi, my name is Ariana Pinedo, and I'm the third person of the group.
So we will be discussing a research article that focuses on functional versus running a low volume, high intensity training and its effects on VO2 max and muscular endurance. So, in this presentation we'll have an introduction section, methods, results, discussion, conclusion, future research and applications, and references. So we've laid out some terms that we'll be using throughout the presentation for you. HIIT, high intensity interval training. HIIT-R, running high intensity interval training. HIIT-F, functional high intensity interval training. Those two will refer to our two groups that this article is on. HIIT is high intensity functional training, body weight. VO2 max, maximum oxygen uptake, and CRF, cardiorespiratory fitness. MICT, moderate intensity continuous training, and Tabata, which is a whole body aerobic exercise. So why does this even matter? I have chosen 4 key points from the article that were its inspiration. The importance of physical activity, different styles of exercise, but the same results, time constraints and adherence, and an additional study. So the importance of physical activity. Obviously health, but also prevention. Prevention of cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, as well as other potentially fatal diseases. Different styles, but the same results. MICT, usually boring, very little variation, but is effective over time. HIIT, more popular because it's a shorter duration, very time efficient, and yields favorable results. Then we have HIFT, which is an endurance and resistance training, which usually results in aerobic improvements as well as muscular performance. And then you have the Tabata protocol, which is a high-intensity intermittent exercise, usually 7 to 8 sets of 20 seconds of exercise and 10 seconds of rest. Time constraints and adherence. MICT, usually too long, which means it has a low adherence rate. But HIIT is time efficient, which increases encouragement and participation. The additional study, the purpose of the additional study was traditional HIIT and multiple model HIIT training and its effects. Oh, we have a question. What did the results show? So the results showed that there was a similar aerobic and anaerobic capacity improvement in both groups. Oh, another question. Muscular performance. Well, muscular performance only improved in the multiple model HIIT training group. While the previous study was very enlightening, it didn't a lot for the general public who uses body weight for exercise. And this is what inspired the research article that we'll be discussing today. So the purpose of this research article was to compare HIIT-F and HIIT-R and its impact on VO2 max and muscular endurance. The hypothesis was VO2 max will show improvements in both groups, functional and running, but only muscular endurance will show improvement in the functional HIIT group. The secondary aim was to determine if HIFT has the same effects on HIIT-R as HIIT-R on cardiorespiratory system. Methods. So, this started out with 18 participants. Unfortunately, 3 dropped out due to time constraints or illness that were completely unrelated to the study. Only 15 completed, which were 11 females, 4 males, ages 22 to 30 years old, and all were moderately trained. Procedures. We'll be looking at the pre-test, post-test, the maximum oxygen uptake, muscular endurance, body composition tests, and their training interventions, as well as exclusion criteria. So the pre and the post-tests were the same. Pre-test gave us the baseline measurements. So it was a 2-day test. Each day was 48 hours apart. Day 1 was body composition and the laboratory treadmill test. Day 2 was muscular endurance. Each participant was asked to come fully hydrated on the testing day, and 24 hours prior to the test could not partake in alcohol or intense training. The body composition test was measured with an electronic scale, and it measured body mass, fat mass, muscle mass, and fat-free mass. This was done early in the morning, after a light breakfast, and on an empty bladder. Next, we have the maximum oxygen uptake, which is the laboratory treadmill test. The first 2 minutes were at a 5% incline at 5 kilometers an hour. The next 2 minutes were 10% incline at 6 kilometers an hour. Every minute after that, incline was increased by 2% and the speed was increased by 1 kilometer. Incline maxed out at 20%, but speed continued to increase by 1 kilometer an hour per minute until volitional exhaustion of participants. Muscular endurance. This test consisted of push-ups, toes to bar, burpees, and broad jumps. The push-ups were step 1, begin in push-up position. Step 2, upper body had to fully touch the floor. Step 3 ensured this by each participant lifting their hands off the ground. Step 4, they would return to push-up position. Toes to bar. Each participant started from hanging from the bar. In step 2, each participant would have to lift their legs together to touch their toes to the bar. Next test was the burpee test. So they'd start in standing position, move down to a squat, put their hands on the floor, kick their legs back into a push-up position, then perform a push-up. Then return to the standing position and perform a squat jump. Broad jumps began with the standing position, and then they jumped forward. The 3 best jumps were recorded for the data. So after a 4-day rest, it was time for the training intervention portion of the study. This was a 4-week training program given to all participants in their respective groups. Week 1. Participants were told to work out 3 times a week with a 10-minute warm-up, 8 20-second workouts with 10-second rest in between, followed by a 5-minute rest. That was to be repeated 3 times. Week 2. Frequency was at 3 times per week with a 10-minute warm-up still 8 20-second workouts with a 10-second rest in between, 5 minutes of rest following. Now 4 times per week, so they increased the sets. Week 3 and week 4, frequency increased to 4 times per week, still with a 10-minute warm-up, still 8 20-second workout, 10-second rest in between, followed by a 5-minute rest, repeated 4 times at a high intensity. For data collection, all sessions were monitored by a continuous heart rate and RPE. All training outside of the 4-week training program were to be logged in a separate journal. In the data, you will see our mean HR is as HR mean HIIT, peak HR will be HR peak HIIT, then we'll have RPE. Each was measured after every set of 20-second workout and 10-second rest. In total, each section was represented by an HR max percentage. This information was given to us by the baseline data taken from the pre-test. So the maximum oxygen uptake treadmill test specifically. But safety first, last, and always. So exclusion criteria for all participants was pregnancy or lactation and pre-existing or acute diseases. To be continued.
Okay, let's go over the statistical analysis section from the article. Here are some key points that I picked out from that section. Training data was analyzed using the student's unpaired t-test. P-values that were less than or equal to 0.05 were indicated as a significant difference. Values presented as mean plus or minus standard deviation. Okay, the results section. So let's discuss some of the results in this study and then we'll tie them back to the hypothesis. So the running group, 96 plus or minus 5% of the participants completed their training session, and then for the functional group, 96 plus or minus 11% of participants completed their training sessions. So on to the training data. So keep in mind that the training data is from across 14 training sessions. So for the running group, the peak heart rate was 94 plus or minus 2% of their heart rate max, and their mean heart rate was 87 plus or minus 3% of their heart rate max. On the other hand, the functional group, their peak heart rate was 87 plus or minus 4% of their heart rate max, and their mean heart rate was 78 plus or minus 6% of their heart rate max. So there's a significant difference between both of these groups. The functional group having the lower percentages. Okay, so here's figure 1 of the article. So on the y-axis we have the percentage of their heart rate max, and then on the x-axis we have the high intensity interval training sessions. And of course there's 14. Right here there's 1 through 14. On the top right we have our index. So the white box represents the peak heart rate for the running group. The gray box represents the peak heart rate for the functional group. And then the gray box with the black stripes represents the heart rate mean for the running group, and the white box for with the black stripes represents the functional group. So the asterisks on the graph represent a significant difference between the two groups. So for example, right here on session 1, you can see that the peak heart rate here with the white box and for the running group, and the peak heart rate for the functional group, there's a significant difference there, that therefore they put an asterisk on top of that session. Same goes for their mean heart rates. So for both the running and functional groups, their cardiorespiratory fitness, their VO2max improved. The running group improved by 13 plus or minus 4%, and the VO2max percentage for the functional group improved by 11 plus or minus 7%. So unfortunately, there was no significant interaction that was found in the muscular endurance test, like between the two groups. On only toes to bar improved by 28%, and we'll see that in table 3 soon. And then for the functional group, only burpees improved by 32%. The broad jumps and push-ups both showed no effect for both groups. Okay, on to body composition. So actually body composition and body weight were unaffected by week 4 for both of the groups. So there was no significant difference in body weight, fat mass, fat-free mass, and muscle mass. So here's table 3. This is one of the more important tables from the article. So this table shows the baseline and the post results for the running and functional groups. So right here we have the running group baseline results on this column, and then the post results on this column for the running group. And then for the functional group, we have the baseline results on this column and the post results on this column. So some of the notable results on this graph that I have discussed with you are the VO2max, which is shown at the very top on the left corner. Then as you go down just below that, there's the heart rate max in beats per minute. And then when we go down, there's the push-ups, and you can see you have the values next to it, the baseline and post, the toes to bar, broad jump, burpees, weight, fat-free mass in a percentage, fat mass in a percentage, and muscle mass in a percentage. Also on this table there is asterisks, and as I mentioned earlier, that represents a significant difference. So if we look at the VO2 max on the top of this table, it's 47.8 plus or minus 5.6. That's the baseline result. When you go on to the right of it, it's the post result, which is 54.1 plus or minus 5.6, and there's an asterisk next to that, so that represents that there is a significant difference between those two numbers. Okay, so neither total training time, rating of perceived exertion, or total training load of habitual training and strength training differed between groups. So here's figure 2 from the article. As you can see on the left side, it's the rated perceived exertion, and then on the bottom again we have the high intensity interval training sessions 1 through 14, and on the top right is our index. We have our white box representing the running group's RPE, and the gray box represents the functional group's RPE. Now, as you can see across all 14 sessions, there was only one session, which is session 5, where there was a significant difference between the groups, but other than that, there was no significant difference, which I mentioned in the previous slide. So now we have table 4. Table 4 shows the 4 weeks of training, and it shows both the running and functional groups training time, RPEs, and TTL. TTL is the total training load, and there was no asterisk on these results or values because there was no significant difference on any of these results for the running and functional groups. So let's go back to the hypothesis. So the hypothesis states that VO2max would be improved by both groups, and muscular endurance would be improved by only one group, which is the functional high intensity interval training group. Now, let's see what the results actually reveal. So one, the running and functional group caused similar improvements in VO2 max and muscular endurance. For example, the running group improved in the toes to bar only, and the functional group improved in the burpees only. And two, the hypothesis that the functional group would be superior in improving muscular endurance is rejected. And three, improvements in muscular endurance and cardiorespiratory fitness are induced by both running and functional high intensity interval training. To be continued.
I will be discussing the discussion, research analysis, and conclusion for our presentation. So the first one I'm going to be discussing is how the first study comparing the cardiorespiratory and muscular endurance responses were between the functional HIIT and the running HIIT regimens that were used in the study. The main findings for both of these interventions caused not same but similar improvements within both of them. So the VO2 max and the muscular endurance was similar between both of the groups that were used. The exercises were toes to bar and burpees. The final exercise was 3 broad jumps from a standing position, and there we have the 3 different exercises. For the muscular endurance test, the participants were asked to perform as many push-ups, toe-to bars, and burpees as possible, and the only rest they got was a 5-minute rest in between each of the sets. The heart rate was continuous, and the RPE monitoring for both of these groups that were used. The body composition was to the nearest 0.1 kilogram, and it was measured with an electronic scale. The mean heart rate and the peak heart rate and the RPE were all directly recorded. The percent of the heart rate max was used with the treadmill test. The habitual training for both HIIT groups, HIIT group F and R, were exertion times the training session time within minutes. The training intervention participants performed either of the two, which were either the HIIT running exercises or the HIIT 3 to 4 set, 8 times 20 seconds, 10-second rest, set rest for 5 minutes. The HIIT also incorporated multiple of the exercises that we just discussed. They all executed with their own body weight, so all those who participated executed within their own body weight. The first training was 3 times a week, 3 sets of 8 times 20 sessions per sessions, and it was 12 minutes per training session. The second training increased, so it was 16 minutes per training session, whereas the first was 12. Then next, we're going to talk about the future research and the applications. So the purpose of the study is functional exercise HIIT as effective and will improve the VO2 max as the muscular endurance in comparison to traditional just running HIIT. So HIIT group F was the functional exercise, and then HIIT group R was the running. So HIIT group F contained 5 females and 2 males, whereas HIIT group F contained 6 females and 2 males. So the HIIT group F performed 3 to 4 sets of low volume exercise, with the rest being within 5 minutes, and the VO2 max was about 11%. And then HIIT group R had a VO2 max about 13%. So HIIT group F had a lower heart rate response. The findings researched that they both improved the VO2 max and muscular endurance to about the same extent, where HIIT group F was just slightly lower, despite the functional exercising having a lower cardiovascular strain. So next, we're going to conclude on what the presentation discussed. So in conclusion, either running or functional HIIT, low volume, it resulted in very similar improvements to the VO2max and certain aspects within muscular endurance. So cardiorespiratory fitness and muscular endurance exercise modalities were not in effect within this. So each individual that participated was about moderately fit. So the muscular endurance and the VO2 max were concluded to be improved with certain aspects that were also taken into consideration throughout the study. The functional HIIT lists similar improvements to running HIIT despite, it being a lower cardiovascular strain. Traditional endurance training modalities was enhancing the cardiorespiratory fitness and the HIIT. It was also useful for improvements in the cardiorespiratory fitness with those who are moderately trained, also with competitive athletes. So it didn't have to be one or the other. It could be those who were moderately trained, like the ones who participated in the study, and those who were competitive athletes. Next, we will discuss the references, and this is the citation that we provided. Thank you for your time.